The first thing I noticed at my cousin's winter wedding wasn't the music or the flowers. It was the empty chair. It sat in the front row right beside my parents, a pale ivory seat with a silk ribbon tied neatly at the back. Reserved. That was the word printed on the small card clipped to it. Reserved for family. And yet it stayed empty. I stood near the back of the vineyard hall, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm champagne, watching my mother smooth the skirt of her dress and my father straighten his tie like they were preparing for a photo shoot instead of a ceremony. My older brother Nathan leaned in to whisper something to them. They laughed, softly, comfortably. No one looked at me. I told myself it didn't matter. I was 32 years old, a project coordinator at a mid-sized architecture firm in Portland with my own apartment, my own bills, my own life. I wasn't a child waiting to be placed at the grown-ups' table. Still, that chair felt like a verdict. The officiant cleared his throat. The string quartet began to play. Guests turned their heads toward the aisle. That was when my mother finally noticed me. Her eyes flicked over sharp and assessing, then widened just a fraction. Not surprise, calculation. She leaned toward my father and murmured something. He glanced back, frowned, then looked away as if I were an inconvenience he hadn't budgeted for. My phone buzzed in my hand. "Mom, you can stand in the back. This is mostly for close family." I stared at the message, the word close burning into my chest. I typed, typed again, then locked the screen without replying. The bride appeared at the end of the aisle, glowing radiant, everything I was, apparently not. As everyone rose, I stayed where I was. That was the moment I understood something I had spent most of my life trying not to see. I wasn't just overlooked. I was managed, placed where I wouldn't interfere with the image. And that image was about to crack. The reception was held in a glass-walled barn, overlooking rows of bare grapevines dusted with frost. White lights twinkled overhead, and the air smelled like eucalyptus and expensive wine. I found my name on a place card near the edge of the room at a table with distant relatives I barely knew, and a couple from my aunt's book club. My parents' table sat front and center, elevated slightly like a stage. Nathan raised his glass during the first toast, charismatic as ever. He worked in private equity, wore tailored suits even on weekends, and had been introduced my entire life as the smart one, the leader, the future. He spoke about family legacy, about how lucky we all were to come from people who built something lasting. I felt a strange tightening in my stomach at the word legacy, because 3 weeks earlier, my grandmother had died. And no one had asked me how I was doing. Grandma Eleanor had been the quiet constant of my childhood, the one who remembered my birthday without reminders, the one who came to my college graduation when my parents sent flowers instead. She used to say in her low, steady voice, "Claire, pay attention to how people treat you when there's nothing to gain." I had paid attention. I just hadn't acted. Until the will reading. The email had come that morning tucked between spam and a calendar reminder. Subject to state meeting, mandatory attendance. Mandatory unless you were me, apparently. The lawyer's office was downtown, all glass and chrome, and intimidating silence. I arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a navy blazer I'd bought specifically to look serious. My parents and Nathan were already there, seated comfortably, coffee cups in hand. My mother glanced up. "Oh, you came." "I was invited," I said. She smiled tightly. "Of course." The lawyer, a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense posture, began by expressing condolences. Then she opened the folder. As she read through the bequests, I felt the familiar rhythm of exclusion. Nathan received stock interests, property shares, voting rights in the family holding company. My parents nodded along, occasionally exchanging satisfied looks. Then the lawyer paused. "And to my granddaughter, Claire Whitman," she read, "I leave the remainder of my personal trust, including the lake house in Ashland and the investment account ending in 742. The room went still. Nathan blinked. My father's hand froze mid-adjustment of his cufflink. My mother let out a small involuntary sound like air escaping a balloon. The lawyer continued unfazed. "This constitutes full ownership effective immediately." My heart hammered so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. The lake house, the one Nathan had been calling his for years, the one my parents had already discussed renovating. My mother recovered first. "There must be some mistake," she said lightly. "Eleanor wasn't herself at the end." The lawyer looked up. "The will was updated 18 months ago. Your mother was of sound mind. There is video documentation if needed." Nathan's face had gone pale, not angry, calculating. I said nothing. I had learned long ago that silence made people underestimate you. After the meeting, my parents cornered me in the hallway. "You can't possibly think you're keeping it." My father said, his voice low and controlled. I didn't do anything, I replied. She made her choice. My mother's eyes flashed. You know how this looks. People will think we favored you. I almost laughed. That night, as I drove back to my apartment, my phone rang. Nathan. Claire, he said, warm as honey. We need to talk. I knew then that the wedding, the empty chair, the sudden interest in conversation, none of it was coincidence. The game had shifted, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't playing defense. I was holding something they wanted, and they had no idea how far I was willing to go to keep it. Nathan invited me to lunch the next day. That alone told me everything. We had not shared a meal one-on-one in over a decade. Not since I was 20, and still foolish enough to believe proximity meant intimacy. When his name lit up on my phone, I didn't answer right away. I watched it ring out, then waited a full hour before calling back. Hey, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Claire, he replied, warm practiced. I was hoping we could talk. Clear the air. Clear the air was his favorite phrase. It sounded collaborative while implying that something was wrong with the atmosphere, not the people breathing in it. We met at a restaurant he chose. Polished concrete floors, minimalist decor prices without dollar signs, the kind of place where power lunches happened quietly and waiters never interrupted. Nathan was already seated when I arrived, jacket draped casually over the back of his chair. He stood to hug me, holding on a second longer than necessary. You look good, he said. Tired but good. I smiled thinly. Busy. He nodded as if that explained everything about my life. We ordered. He chose for us, suggesting dishes like it was generous rather than controlling. When the waiter left, Nathan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. I'll be direct, he said. Mom and Dad are concerned. Of course they were. About what I asked. The will, he said. The way it landed. I took a sip of water, buying myself a moment. I didn't write it. No, he agreed quickly, but you're benefiting from it. There it was. The implication that inheritance was a moral failing if it flowed in the wrong direction. Nathan sighed, rubbing his temple like this was all very exhausting. Claire, you know Grandma didn't understand the structure of the family assets. She loved you, sure, but she didn't grasp the long-term implications. She grasped plenty, I said quietly. She ran her own business for 40 years. That was different, he waved off. This is complex. I met his eyes, too complex for me. He hesitated. Just a beat. Enough. I didn't say that, he replied smoothly. I'm saying it makes more sense for the lake house and the trust to remain consolidated under the family umbrella. And by family, I said, you mean you. He laughed lightly as if I'd made a joke. I mean efficiency. The food arrived. The conversation paused, then resumed under the polite choreography of passing plates and refilling glasses. We were thinking, Nathan continued, lowering his voice, that the cleanest solution would be for you to transfer the assets to the holding company. In return, you'd receive a generous annual stipend. There it was, the offer. Not ownership, not autonomy, an allowance. I'm 32, I said, not 12. It's not about age, he said quickly. It's about experience. I set my fork down. You think Grandma didn't know what she was doing, but she did. She told me why. That got his attention. Oh, he said carefully. She said she trusted me to protect what mattered, I replied. Not just the money, the people who worked for her, the property, the intent. Nathan's jaw tightened. She was emotional. She was observant. The temperature at the table shifted. The warmth drained from his smile. Claire, he said more sharply now, don't make this difficult. I leaned back in my chair. You've never worried about difficulty before. He exhaled slowly. You're being naive. This kind of money changes things. People notice. You don't have the infrastructure to manage it. You mean I don't have you, I said. His eyes hardened. I mean you don't have protection. That was the threat. Subtle polish delivered with a smile. I'll think about it, I said, standing. Nathan looked surprised. You will? Yes, I replied. I think best alone. That afternoon I drove out to Ashland. The lake house sat at the end of a gravel road framed by tall pines and winter light. It smelled like cedar and old books and the faint ghost of my grandmother's perfume. I walked through the rooms, slowly touching familiar surfaces. This place had held laughter and grief and silence. It had never judged me. In the study I found a sealed envelope tucked inside a desk drawer. Claire, it read on the front in Grandma Eleanor's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter written months before her death. She wrote about watching the family dynamic shift over the years, about how success had hardened some and softened others, about how she worried that money had become a substitute for love. I see how they treat you, she wrote, and I see how you endure it. That endurance is not weakness, but I do not want you to spend your life surviving rooms you could own. I sat on the floor and cried, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly like grief finally finding a place to land. The next morning my mother called. We need to talk, she said without greeting. I spoke with Nathan, I replied. Yes, she said, and we're all aligned. Of course you are, I thought. She launched into logistics, taxes, optics, what people would say, how difficult it would be for me to manage the lake house while working full-time. I've already spoken to a property manager, she said. We can take this burden off your hands. It's not a burden, I said. It's a gift. There was a pause, then her tone sharpened. Claire, don't be selfish. The word landed heavy. I've been quiet my whole life, I said. That wasn't selflessness, it was avoidance. You're risking family harmony, she snapped. No, I replied calmly, I'm exposing its absence. That night, an email arrived from the family attorney. Polite, formal, urgent. Subject clarification required regarding asset transfer. I didn't reply. Instead, I called a lawyer of my own. Her name was Rachel Monroe. She specialized in estate disputes and had a reputation for being thorough to the point of discomfort. After listening to my story, she said one sentence that changed everything. They're not worried about the money, she said. They're worried about control. That was when I stopped feeling guilty. Because guilt only works when you believe you've done something wrong. And for the first time, I knew I hadn't. What I didn't know yet was how far they were willing to go to take it back, and how much I would have to lose before I finally stopped trying to keep the peace. Rachel Monroe's office was nothing like the places my family preferred. No glass walls, no minimalist art, just a converted craftsman house with creaky floors, overflowing bookshelves, and a framed newspaper headline on the wall that read, "Local attorney blocks hostile takeover of family trust." I sat across from her at a wide oak desk, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I hadn't touched. "They're escalating," Rachel said, scanning the email chain I'd forwarded her. "Subtly, but yes." I swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means they're laying groundwork," she replied. "Soft pressure first, reasonable concern. Then comes the narrative shift." Narrative shift. She leaned back in her chair. "From 'we're worried about you' to 'you're unstable.'" The word sent a chill through me. "They wouldn't," I said, "more hope than certainty." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "You're new to litigation, Claire. Families get uglier than corporations when money is involved. There's history here, and history is leverage." She slid a document across the desk. I pulled the trust records. "Your grandmother anticipated resistance." She put in a no contest clause. I looked down at the page, meaning if they challenge the will and lose, they get nothing. For the first time since the reading, I smiled. "That's good, right?" "It's powerful," Rachel corrected. "But it also raises the stakes. If they move, they'll move carefully." On my drive home, my phone buzzed again. "Mom." I let it go to voicemail. "Claire," her voice said, brittle and rehearsed. "We're concerned about your recent behavior, ignoring emails, refusing reasonable discussions. This isn't like you. Please call me back." Recent behavior. As if standing up for myself were a medical symptom. That evening, my landlord emailed. Subject request for verification. He'd received an inquiry about my financial stability. Someone claiming to be a concerned family member had asked whether I was behind on rent. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. They were testing the story. The next day at work, my manager asked if everything was okay. "You seem distracted," she said gently. "And HR received an odd call, anonymous, suggesting you might be under personal strain." I forced a smile. "Family stuff." She nodded, but her eyes lingered with concern. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking. I called Rachel. "They're doing it," I said. "They're painting me as unstable." "Yes," she replied calmly, "which is why we document everything, starting now." She instructed me to save voicemails, screenshot emails, keep a log of interactions, dates, times, exact language. "Assume everything will be read aloud in a courtroom," she said. That night, I slept with my phone on the pillow beside me like a lifeline. 2 days later, Nathan showed up at my apartment. No call, no warning. I opened the door to find him standing there with a grocery bag and an expression of practiced concern. "I was in the neighborhood," he said. "Thought I'd check on you." My stomach tightened. "I didn't invite you," I replied. "I know," he said softly. "That's why I brought food. You always forget to eat when you're stressed." He stepped inside without waiting for permission. "You need to leave," I said. He set the bag on the counter. "Claire, listen to me. This is spiraling." "Because you're pushing it," I snapped. He sighed. "Because you're isolating yourself." I crossed my arms. "You mean not complying?" He studied me, his gaze shifting from my face to the stack of mail on the table, the half-packed boxes from my recent trip to the lake house. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Really?" I laughed. It came out sharp. "There it is." "There what?" "The script," I said. "The concern, the implication." He stiffened. "I'm worried about you." "No," I said quietly. "You're worried about losing." His jaw clenched. "You're not equipped for this." "I'm more equipped than you think." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're alone in this, Claire. You don't have the support system for a fight like this." I met his gaze. "You made sure of that." Silence stretched between us. Then his tone changed. I spoke to a psychiatrist, he said. The room seemed to tilt. You what? A friend, he clarified quickly, off the record. I described what's happening, the stress, the paranoia, the fixation. My hands curled into fists. Get out! Claire, if this goes to court, get out, I repeated. He raised his hands. I'm trying to help. You're trying to discredit me, I said, and if you don't leave now, I will call the police. For a moment I saw it, the calculation, the risk assessment. Then he smiled sadly. I hope you get the help you need. When he left, I locked the door and slid down against it, heart racing. I called Rachel immediately. That was a mistake on his part, she said after I finished. A big one. Why, I asked, voice shaking. Because he admitted intent, she said. And because you have a witness. What witness? Me, she replied. I told you not to meet him alone. But now we know the direction they're heading. That night, an envelope appeared under my door. Inside was a letter from a law firm I recognized, subject notice of concern and proposed evaluation. They were requesting a voluntary mental health assessment, citing family concern and recent erratic decisions regarding inherited assets. I laughed, then I cried. Then I stopped, because something inside me hardened. They weren't trying to negotiate anymore. They were trying to remove me from the board. And suddenly the lake house, the money, the legacy, none of it mattered as much as this. My name, my credibility, my right to exist without being managed. I emailed Rachel 3 words. They crossed the line. Her reply came seconds later. Good. Now we stop playing defense. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't afraid. I was angry. And anger, when focused, can be a very precise tool. Rachel didn't raise her voice when I showed her the letter. She didn't swear. She didn't gasp. She read it once then, a second time slower, her finger tracing the margins like she was reading a map. Good, she said finally. I stared at her. Good. Yes, she repeated. This is no longer subtle, which means they've made their first real mistake. I sank into the chair across from her desk, exhaustion settling into my bones. They're trying to declare me unstable. They're trying to scare you into compliance, Rachel corrected. Those are not the same thing. She slid the letter back toward me. This is not a court order. It's a request, framed as concern, designed to provoke panic. And if I refuse, then they escalate, she said calmly, which is exactly what we want. I frowned. Why would we want that? Because escalation leaves fingerprints, she said. Right now they're insinuating. Next they'll overreach. And when they do, we document it. I exhaled slowly. I don't want to be destroyed to make a point. You won't be, Rachel said. But you do need to stop trying to be reasonable with people who have already decided you're disposable. That word landed hard. Disposable. Rachel leaned forward. Claire, tell me the truth. Have you ever had a diagnosis? Any history they could twist? No, I said immediately. I've never even been on antidepressants. Good, she said. Then this is what it looks like. An attempted coercion through reputational threat. She opened a folder and turned her screen toward me. I pulled court records, she said. Nathan has done this before. My chest tightened. To whom? A former business partner, she said. 6 years ago. When the man refused to sell his shares, Nathan's firm suggested he was mentally unfit to manage risk. They pushed for a competency evaluation. The partner backed down before it went public. I felt sick, so this is his playbook. Yes, Rachel said. He just underestimated you. On my way home, I didn't drive straight back to my apartment. I drove to the lake house. It was late afternoon, the winter light already thinning. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, letting the quiet settle around me. This place felt solid, unimpressed by drama, unmoved by power plays. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table where Grandma used to do crossword puzzles, her reading glasses perched halfway down her nose. I imagined her there now watching me carefully. They think you're weak, she would have said, because you're kind. Let them. That night I made a decision. The next morning I emailed the law firm that sent the letter. Thank you for your concern. I decline your request. All future communication should go through my attorney. I CC'd Rachel. Within an hour my mother called. Her voice was trembling just slightly. Why are you doing this? Because you are trying to control me, I said. We are trying to protect you, she insisted. From what I asked, ownership. You're being reckless, she snapped. You're alienating everyone who cares about you. That's not true, I replied. I'm alienating people who benefit from my silence. There was a long pause. Then her voice dropped. Cold. You don't understand what you're risking. I understand exactly, I said, and I'm willing to take that risk. She hung up on me. 2 days later, Rachel called. They filed a petition, she said. My stomach flipped. What kind? Emergency conservatorship, she replied. Temporary, limited scope. They're claiming concern about your capacity to manage inherited assets. I closed my eyes. So they're doing it. Yes, Rachel said, and now we counter. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday. 5 days. In those 5 days, my life narrowed to preparation and sleep. Rachel assembled affidavits from my employer, my landlord, 2 longtime friends, and my primary care physician. Statements attesting to my stability, my professionalism, my capacity. She subpoenaed the psychiatrist Nathan claimed to have consulted. He won't testify, she said, because there was no evaluation, just a conversation, which violates professional ethics if it's being used this way. On Wednesday, Nathan emailed me directly. Subject, please. The body was short. Claire, this has gone too far. Withdraw your opposition and we can resolve this privately. Think about Mom. I forwarded it to Rachel without replying. On Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch in the lake house, lights off, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the water. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, I answered. Claire, a woman's voice said softly. It's Linda. I stiffened. Linda was my aunt, my mother's sister, the family mediator, the one who always urged me to keep the peace. I heard about the hearing, she said. Yes, I replied. I don't agree with how they're handling this, she said quickly, but I'm worried about you. I almost laughed. Are you? I asked. Yes, she said. This could follow you. Public records, career implications. Linda, I said, my voice steady. Did you know Grandma changed her will? There was a pause. Yes, she admitted. She told me. Did she tell you why? Another pause, longer. She said you were the only one who never asked her for anything, Linda said quietly. I swallowed. She also said, Linda continued, that she trusted you because you didn't need to be managed. Tears blurred my vision. Then why are you calling me? I asked. Linda sighed. Because your mother asked me to. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you for being honest. After we hung up, I felt something settle inside me. Clarity. The morning of the hearing, I wore a charcoal suit and flat shoes. I pulled my hair back. No jewelry, no softness they could misread. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and old paper. Nathan was already there, standing with my parents and 2 attorneys. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father looked tired. Nathan, on the other hand, looked confident. That didn't last long. The judge was a woman in her early 60s, sharp eyes, no patience for theatrics. Rachel spoke first. She laid out the facts. The inheritance, the pressure, the unsolicited evaluation request, the conflict of interest. Then she presented the emails. Nathan shifted in his seat. Then came the psychiatrist, or rather the absence of one. The judge frowned. So there was no formal assessment. No, Your Honor, Rachel said. Only a casual discussion framed as concern, later weaponized. The judge turned to Nathan's attorney. That is, troubling. When it was Nathan's turn to speak, he stood. He talked about family, about worry, about fear that I was being influenced, by whom the judge asked. He hesitated. By isolation, he said. Rachel stood. May I respond? The judge nodded. Isolation, Rachel said, is not a diagnosis, and independence is not impairment. The judge ruled quickly. Petition denied. No conservatorship, no evaluation, no further action. As we exited the courtroom, my mother burst into tears. Nathan didn't look at me. Rachel leaned close and whispered, They gambled. They lost. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. Because losing control doesn't make people retreat. It makes them desperate. And desperation, I was about to learn, is far more dangerous than confidence. The backlash didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, small strategic cuts meant to bleed me slowly. The first was my job. On Monday morning, 3 days after the hearing, my supervisor asked me to step into HR. Her smile was tight, apologetic. The kind people wear when they've already decided something and don't want to feel guilty about it. There's been a complaint, HR said, sliding a folder across the table. Anonymous. I didn't touch it. About what I asked. Concerns about judgment, she replied carefully. Given your recent legal situation, I felt a cold calm settle over me. The court ruled in my favor. Yes, she said quickly. But perception matters. We're a risk-averse organization. There it was again, not facts, perception. They placed me on administrative leave. Paid for now, pending review. I walked out of the building feeling numb, my badge heavy in my pocket, like something already obsolete. I called Rachel from the parking lot. They're extending the narrative, she said after I explained. This is retaliation by proxy. Can they do this? I asked. They can try, she said, and we will add it to the record. That night my phone filled with messages. Cousins I barely spoke to. Old family friends. People who had never asked how I was before suddenly expressing concern. Are you okay? We heard things. You should really talk to your parents. I didn't respond. The next escalation came from the bank. A hold had been placed on the trust's operating account. Temporary, they said, for review. Rachel was furious. They cited internal compliance concerns, she told me. Guess who flagged it? I didn't need to ask. Nathan was tightening the net, hoping to starve me into submission. I drove back to the lake house that evening and sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the water darken as the sun disappeared. For the first time since this began, doubt crept in. Not about the truth, about the cost. I had lost my job temporarily but publicly. My reputation was being chipped away. Friends were hesitant. Silence followed me everywhere. Was this worth it? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You don't have to burn everything down. We can still fix this." I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. "Think about what you're losing." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the messages to Rachel. Her response came quickly. "Good. Threats without teeth are still threats." The following morning, I met with her in person. She had printed out a timeline that covered her entire conference table. "Here's what they didn't expect," she said, tapping the papers. "You're not the only one paying attention." She slid a document toward me. It was a deposition transcript. "Who is this?" I asked. "A former CFO of Nathan's firm," she said. "He reached out after the hearing, quietly." My heart skipped. "Why?" "Because he saw the petition," she replied, and recognized the tactic. She explained that the CFO had been forced out years earlier after questioning certain internal transfers. When he resisted, Nathan's firm suggested he was under personal stress and not fit to oversee finances. Sound familiar? "He settled," Rachel said, signed an NDA, walked away. "But he kept records," I said slowly. Rachel smiled. "He kept everything." The pieces began to align. This wasn't just about my inheritance. This was a pattern. Abuse of authority, weaponized concern, control disguised as care. Rachel leaned back. "If we connect this to your case, it changes everything." How I asked. "Because then this isn't a family dispute," she said. "It's evidence of systemic misconduct." I felt something ignite in my chest. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Patience," she said, "and resolve." 2 days later, the local paper ran a short item in the business section. "Former executive files whistleblower complaint against prominent firm." Nathan's firm wasn't named yet, but it would be. My mother called that night. Her voice was tight, angry. "What have you done?" "I didn't do anything," I said. "Someone else told the truth." "You're humiliating us," she snapped. "People are asking questions." "Good," I replied. "They should." She was silent for a moment. Then quieter. "Nathan is under a lot of pressure." I almost laughed. "So was Grandma," I said. "So was I." "You could stop this," she said. "All of it." I shook my head. "You taught me to be polite at the expense of honest. I'm done with that lesson." She hung up. That weekend, I received a certified letter. A defamation notice. Nathan's attorneys accused me of spreading false narratives that harmed his reputation. Rachel read it and smiled. "They're scared," she said. "This is bluster." "Will it work?" I asked. "No," she replied. "But it gives us standing." Standing for what, I wondered. The answer came faster than I expected. Rachel called me into her office the next morning. She looked energized, focused. "We're filing a countersuit," she said, "for harassment, abusive process, and tortious interference." "With my job?" I asked. "Yes," she said, "and more." She pointed to the timeline. "They tried to paint you as unstable. They interfered with your employment. They attempted to seize control of your assets under false pretenses." I swallowed. "That's big." "So is what they did," she replied. As I left her office, I felt the weight of the past months press against me. I thought about all the times I had swallowed words to keep the peace, all the rooms I had made myself smaller in so others could feel powerful. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. I dreamed of my grandmother standing at the edge of the lake. She didn't say anything. She just nodded. When I woke up, my phone buzzed with a notification. "Breaking news: regulatory agencies open preliminary inquiry into financial practices of regional investment firm." Nathan's firm was named this time. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. The tide was turning, and for the first time I realized something crucial. They had spent years underestimating me, and now they were about to pay the price for it. The first apology came wrapped in fear. It arrived as an email from my father sent just after midnight. No subject line, just a block of text that read more like a confession than a message. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the edge of my bed in the lake house, phone in my hand, listening to the wind move through the trees outside. For most of my life, I had rushed toward any sign of softening from my family. I had learned early that affection was conditional and fleeting, something you grabbed quickly before it vanished again. This time I waited. When I finally read it, his words were careful, strained. He said he never meant for things to go this far, that Nathan had assured them everything would be handled quietly, that they were only trying to protect the family name. There it was again, the name. "Not me, not my future, the name." He ended the message by saying he hoped we could talk, just the two of us, without lawyers. I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because I was done translating myself into something easier for others to digest. The next day, the bank lifted the temporary hold on the trust account. Rachel called me immediately. They didn't do it out of kindness, she said. Compliance was forced to reverse it once the inquiry went public. I exhaled. One pressure point released. Another tightened. That afternoon, a black sedan pulled into the gravel drive of the lake house. I watched it from the kitchen window, heart pounding, as Nathan stepped out. No call, no warning. Just entitlement. I didn't open the door. He knocked anyway. Firm, insistent. "Claire," he called. "We need to talk." I stayed where I was. He knocked again, louder this time. "I know you're in there." I opened the door just enough to speak. "You're trespassing," I said. He smiled thinly. "We grew up coming here. Don't be dramatic." "This property is mine," I replied. "Leave." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't want to do this." "I already am," I said. He exhaled sharply, frustration flashing across his face. "You think you've won because some bureaucrats are sniffing around. You have no idea how exposed you are." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Is that a threat?" He hesitated. "Just enough." "No," he said. "It's advice." I opened the door wider, stepping onto the porch so the security camera above the frame could see us clearly. "Say it again," I said. His eyes flicked upward. He saw the camera. He recalibrated instantly. "I'm worried about you," he said loudly, carefully. "This stress isn't healthy." I smiled. "You should put that in writing." He turned and walked back to his car without another word. That evening, Rachel called. "He contacted me," she said, "asked if we could settle." My pulse quickened. "On what terms?" "Confidentiality," she said. "Non-disparagement. You retain the inheritance. He wants the countersuit dropped." "And the regulatory inquiry?" I asked. She paused. "He can't stop that." I stared out at the lake. The water was still deceptively calm. "So he wants to save face," I said, "not make amends." "Correct," Rachel replied. "Tell him no." She didn't hesitate. I already did. 2 days later, the CFO's whistleblower complaint went public. Names, dates, transfers. Nathan's firm issued a statement denying wrongdoing while placing 2 senior partners on administrative leave. Nathan was one of them. The press called me next. Rachel fielded most of it, but one journalist reached me through an old email address. "Did you anticipate this outcome?" she asked. I thought about the years of silence, the compliance, the obedience. "No," I said honestly. "I anticipated being ignored." That quote made the article. My mother didn't call after that. Neither did my aunt. But my cousin Emily did. She was younger, always watching, always quiet. "I'm sorry," she said, voice shaking. "I didn't know how bad it was." "It's okay," I replied. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes," she said softly, "I do." She told me Nathan had used her credit years earlier to float a short-term investment. Promised it would be invisible. Fixed within weeks. It took her 5 years to recover her score. "I thought it was my fault," she said, "that I was irresponsible." My hands shook as I listened. "You weren't," I said. "You were exploited." She sent me documents, old emails, screenshots. Rachel called them gold. By the end of the week, 3 more former employees had come forward. Patterns emerged. A reputation carefully curated. Power quietly abused. And always the same tactic. Question the person, not the behavior. I wasn't alone anymore. But that didn't mean I was safe. One night, as I pulled into the driveway of my apartment in the city to grab some belongings, I noticed my door ajar. Just slightly. My heart slammed into my ribs. I didn't go inside. I backed away slowly and called the police. They found nothing missing, no forced entry. But the message was clear. I sat in my car afterward, hands trembling. Rachel was furious. "They're trying to intimidate you," she said. "We're filing for a protective order." "I don't want to live like this," I whispered. "I know," she said gently, "but you're close." "Close to what?" The answer came sooner than expected. On Friday afternoon, Rachel walked into her office holding a thick envelope. She dropped it on the table between us. "They've offered mediation," she said, "court-appointed, mandatory." I stared at the envelope. "What changed?" I asked. She smiled grimly. The board. Nathan's firm had turned on him. He was no longer useful. I leaned back, exhaustion washing over me. This had started as an inheritance dispute. It had become a reckoning, and I knew deep in my bones that the next move would decide everything. Because men like Nathan don't apologize when they lose. They look for someone else to blame. And I had a feeling he wasn't finished trying to make that someone me. The mediation notice arrived like a ceasefire flag, white and fraying at the edges. Court-appointed, mandatory attendance, neutral location. Rachel called it what it was, a controlled environment designed to stop the bleeding before it reached the arteries. "Do not mistake this for remorse," she warned me. "This is containment." I believed her. The mediation was scheduled for the following Tuesday in a federal building downtown. No press, no phones, no witnesses. Just a long table, a retired judge acting as mediator, and 2 sides pretending they still had equal footing. The night before, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of Nathan, but because I was finally going to have to look him in the eye and hear what he thought accountability sounded like. Rachel met me in the lobby that morning. She wore a dark blue suit and the expression she reserved for trials she intended to win. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. The room was windowless and smelled faintly of burnt coffee. Nathan was already seated on one side of the table with his attorney. His posture was rigid, his jaw tight. The confidence was gone, replaced by something sharper. Calculation. My parents sat behind him. My mother's eyes were red. My father wouldn't look at me. The mediator, Judge Haraldson, cleared his throat. "We're here to explore resolution," he said, "not to relitigate." Nathan nodded, of course. Rachel didn't respond. The judge gestured to Nathan's side. "You may begin." Nathan stood. He spoke slowly, carefully, choosing words like tools. "This situation has spiraled far beyond what anyone intended," he said. "We are here in good faith." Rachel scribbled something on her notepad. Nathan continued. "My concern has always been for my cousin's well-being and the preservation of our family legacy." I clenched my hands under the table. The mediator turned to me. "Ms. Hayes, would you like to respond?" Rachel spoke before I could. "We are here because Mr. Caldwell attempted to seize control of my client's assets under false pretenses, interfered with her employment, and initiated a pattern of harassment." Nathan's attorney shifted in his chair. The mediator raised a hand. "Let's focus on resolution." Nathan sat down. The mediator leaned forward. "What is your proposal?" Nathan's attorney slid a document across the table. I scanned it. They were offering a lump sum settlement in exchange for dropping the countersuit, waiving all claims, and signing a sweeping non-disclosure agreement. They also wanted me to relinquish any future involvement in the trust's governance. "They want to buy your silence," Rachel whispered. I looked at Nathan. His eyes met mine for the first time that day. There was something pleading there, not remorse. Fear. "I won't sign this," I said. Nathan exhaled sharply. "Claire, please, think about what you're risking." I leaned forward. "You already took that from me." The mediator frowned. "Ms. Hayes, compromise is expected here." "I have compromised my entire life," I said quietly. "This is where it ends." The room fell silent. Nathan's attorney whispered to him urgently. He shook his head. Then Nathan stood again. "Fine," he said, voice tight. "If she wants to burn this down, we'll proceed." Rachel smiled. "Proceed where she asked." "Discovery." Nathan froze. The mediator looked confused. "Discovery." Rachel turned to him. "Mr. Caldwell is attempting to avoid it." She slid a new folder onto the table. "These are affidavits from 5 former employees detailing financial irregularities and coercive tactics," she said. "If we proceed, they will testify." Nathan's face went pale. The mediator looked at him sharply. "Is this accurate?" Nathan didn't answer. The judge sighed. "Mr. Caldwell, I strongly advise reconsideration." Nathan sat down hard. He stared at the table. "I can't go to trial," he muttered. There it was. Not concern, not family. Self-preservation. The mediator took a breath. "Then let's talk about realistic terms." Rachel leaned in. Full withdrawal of the conservatorship attempt. Public retraction of statements regarding my client's mental fitness. Compensation for lost wages and legal fees. No NDA restricting her speech. Nathan's attorney balked. "No NDA is unacceptable." Rachel shrugged. "So is perjury." I watched Nathan crumble in real time. He nodded slowly. "I'll agree," he said, "but only if this ends here." Rachel glanced at me. I thought of my job, my reputation, my grandmother's letter. "This ends when the truth is acknowledged," I said, "not buried." Nathan swallowed. "Fine." The mediator drafted the framework. As the meeting adjourned, my mother finally stood. She walked toward me, stopping just short. "I never thought you'd do this," she said softly. I met her gaze. "I never thought you'd let them try." She flinched. I left the building with Rachel at my side. Outside, the city noise felt loud alive. Rachel exhaled. That was the turning point. "For him," I said. She nodded. "And for you." That afternoon, a press release hit the wires. Nathan Caldwell withdraws conservatorship petition. Cites miscommunication. The retraction was public, permanent. My phone buzzed nonstop. Support, shock, silence. That night alone at the lake house, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the water. I wasn't celebrating. I was bracing. Because while the mediation ended one battle, it didn't end the war. Men like Nathan don't forgive humiliation. They retreat, regroup, and strike where you least expect it. And as I watched the dark water ripple under the moonlight, I felt it in my bones. The final blow was still coming. The final blow didn't come from Nathan. It came from my parents. I should have seen that coming. 3 days after the mediation, my mother called and left a voicemail that sounded calm enough to be dangerous. "We need to talk," she said, "as a family. Not about the settlement, not about the lies, not about what they had allowed to happen. Family." Rachel warned me when I told her. "If they couldn't control the outcome, they'll try to control the narrative." I agreed to meet them anyway, not because I owed them anything, but because I was finished wondering what they would do next. We met at my parents' house, the same house I grew up in. Same front door, same framed photos on the wall, graduations, weddings, milestones. Most of them didn't include me. My mother had set the table like it was a holiday. Coffee, pastries, napkins folded neatly. Normalcy is a powerful weapon. My father sat stiffly, hands clasped. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. They didn't ask how I was. My mother started immediately. "This has gone far enough," she said. "People are talking, neighbors, church friends. Your aunt called from Arizona." I waited. "Nathan is under investigation," she continued. "His career may never recover." I met her eyes. "That's a consequence, not a tragedy." She inhaled sharply. "You sound cruel." "No," I said. "I sound honest." My father finally spoke. "You could have stopped this." I felt something inside me snap into place. "No," I replied. "You could have." Silence. My mother's voice dropped. "Do you know what people are saying about our family?" I nodded. "That you protected power instead of truth." Her eyes filled with tears. "Real ones, I think." "We raised you better than this," she whispered. I leaned forward. "You raised me to stay quiet, to be reasonable, to absorb damage so other people could stay comfortable." My father shook his head. "We were trying to keep peace." "At my expense," I said. "Always." That was when she did it. She reached into her purse and placed an envelope on the table. My stomach tightened. "What's that?" I asked. "A statement," she said. "From us." I opened it slowly. It was a letter addressed to friends and family, explaining that recent legal events had caused confusion, that emotions were high, that misunderstandings had occurred, and that I had been under considerable stress following our grandmother's death. They didn't call me unstable. They didn't need to. They implied it. "This makes it sound like I imagined everything I said quietly." My mother nodded. "It gives people something to hold on to. It protects everyone." "Everyone except me," I said. My father finally looked up. "Claire, please. If you don't agree to this, we'll have to distance ourselves." I laughed. Not loudly, not bitterly. "Just once." "You already did," I said. My mother's face hardened. "So you're choosing this?" I folded the letter and placed it back on the table. "I'm choosing myself." She stood abruptly. "Then we have nothing more to say." I stood too. "That's not true." They froze. "You have a choice," I said. "You can tell the truth, or you can protect the lie, but you don't get to do both and keep me in your life." My father's hands trembled. My mother looked away. I walked out without another word. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't cry that night. I felt hollow, but clean. The next morning, Rachel called. "They issued the retraction," she said, publicly. I closed my eyes. "Good." And she added, "Your employer reached out. HR wants to talk." I met them that afternoon. This time I brought documentation. Court rulings, retractions, a timeline. They apologized, carefully, legally. They reinstated me, with back pay. It should have felt like victory. It didn't, because something else had already shifted. That evening I sat alone at the lake house and opened my grandmother's letter again. I read the last line slowly. "You do not owe your life to people who only love you when you are useful." For the first time I let myself grieve. Not just for her, but for the parents I wished I had. For the family I kept trying to earn. Grief came quietly, like rain. And when it passed, something unexpected followed. Relief. The following week, my parents sent the letter anyway. A revised version, softer, still dishonest. I didn't respond. Neither did I defend myself publicly. I didn't need to, because the truth was already documented, and lies don't age well. People noticed. Friends reached out privately. Former colleagues, distant relatives. Some apologized. Some stayed silent. I learned who needed me small to feel safe, and who didn't. Nathan didn't contact me again. Through the press, I learned he had resigned. Not fired, resigned. It was framed as personal reasons. That was enough. On a quiet Sunday morning, I walked down to the edge of the lake. The water was still, reflective. I realized then that the final blow hadn't destroyed me. It had freed me. I was no longer fighting for a seat at a table that required my silence. I was building something else, something honest, something mine. And the next chapter wouldn't be about survival. It would be about what happens after you stop asking for permission. Freedom is quieter than people imagine. There was no dramatic aftermath after I walked away from my parents' house. No barrage of calls, no public confrontation, just absence. At first it felt like standing in an empty room after a fire alarm had stopped ringing. My body stayed tense, waiting for noise that never came. The silence was unfamiliar. An unfamiliar silence can feel like danger when you've lived inside constant pressure. I threw myself into work, not to escape but to ground myself. My employer reinstated me carefully, almost reverently, as if afraid I might break. Colleagues avoided eye contact at first, unsure which version of the story they were allowed to acknowledge. Then slowly things normalized. Projects resumed, meetings filled my calendar, my competence spoke louder than gossip ever could. One afternoon, my manager stopped by my desk. "I should have trusted my instincts," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." I nodded, "Thank you." That was enough. At the lake house, life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I was craving. Mornings with coffee on the porch, evenings with books I never had time to finish. The house didn't ask me to explain myself. It didn't need me to perform. I started sleeping through the night. Rachel called less often. Not because things were unresolved, but because there was nothing left to fight. "They're done," she said during one call. "Legally and strategically." "What about personally?" I asked. She paused. "People like Nathan don't change. They adapt, but you're no longer accessible." That mattered. News filtered in through indirect channels. Nathan had moved out of state, quietly, no farewell posts, no announcements, just disappearance. My mother didn't call. My father sent one short email weeks later. "I hope you're well." I didn't reply. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I was done translating silence into obligation. Unexpectedly, the first real crack in the family narrative came from someone else. My Aunt Linda showed up at the lake house one afternoon. No warning, no preamble. She looked tired, less composed than I remembered. "I didn't believe you," she said, standing on the porch. "Not at first." I waited. "I thought if I stayed neutral, things would calm down," she continued. "I thought that was kindness." And now I asked, "And now I see neutrality was just convenience," she said quietly. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't justify herself. She just said, "I'm sorry." I let her in. We talked for hours. About grandma, about family patterns, about how silence gets rewarded until it doesn't. When she left, she hugged me tightly. "You were braver than all of us," she said. I didn't correct her. Bravery implies choice. For me, this had become necessity. That night I dreamed of my grandmother again. This time she was sitting at the kitchen table, humming softly, completely at ease. When she looked up at me, she smiled, not with approval but recognition. I woke with a sense of completion I couldn't explain. At work, something unexpected happened. I was asked to mentor a junior employee who had been struggling after a workplace investigation unrelated to me. She sat across from me, hands folded, eyes wary. "I feel like once people doubt you," she said, "that's it. You're marked." I shook my head. "You're only marked if you accept their version of you." She frowned. "How do you not? You build evidence," I said, "and you stop performing for people who benefit from misunderstanding you." She nodded slowly, like someone storing a sentence they'd need later. Helping her helped me. I realized that my experience, painful as it had been, had stripped away something false, the need to be perceived correctly by everyone. You don't need universal belief. You need integrity. My mother finally sent a message in early autumn. Not an apology, a question. "Are you ever coming home?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, "I am home." She didn't respond. And that was fine. I had stopped confusing blood with belonging. On a cool October morning, I hosted my first gathering at the lake house. Not family. Friends, colleagues, people who had chosen me and whom I had chosen back. We cooked together, laughed easily, sat by the fire as the sun went down. No one asked about the inheritance, or the lawsuit, or the scandal. They asked about books I loved, places I wanted to travel, what I was building next. Later, as I cleaned up alone, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Pride. Not in having won, but in having endured without becoming what hurt me. I thought about my parents then, not with resentment but distance. They had made their choice, over and over again, and I had finally made mine. The next chapter of my life wouldn't be defined by opposition. It would be defined by intention. What I invested in, who I allowed close, what I no longer tolerated. That night, standing at the edge of the lake, I understood something clearly. The inheritance wasn't the house, or the money, or the trust. It was the permission my grandmother had given me to stop surviving and start living. And that I realized was the part my family could never take back, no matter how hard they tried. The thing about intention is that it doesn't announce itself. It shows up in small decisions repeated quietly until one day you look around and realize your life feels different. Not easier, truer. By winter, the lake house had become less of a refuge and more of a foundation. I spent weekdays in the city and weekends there, moving between two versions of myself that no longer felt at odds. The woman who negotiated contracts and navigated office politics, and the woman who walked barefoot across cold wooden floors and let the morning light wake her naturally. Both were real, neither needed to apologize for existing. At work, my reputation shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. People sought my input more, not because I was louder, but because I was precise. I no longer over-explained. I no longer softened my opinions to make them easier to swallow. One afternoon during a tense meeting, a senior director dismissed a junior analyst's concern with a wave of his hand. I heard myself speak before I'd fully thought it through. "She's right," I said calmly, "and ignoring it will cost us more later." The room went quiet. The director studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Let's take another look." Afterward, the analyst thanked me, her voice shaky. "I've never seen someone do that without flinching," she said. "I used to flinch," I replied. "I just got tired. Outside of work, I began rebuilding my inner circle, not expanding it, refining it. I stopped saying yes out of habit. I stopped attending events that drained me. I chose people who didn't require constant explanation. It was startling how much energy returned when I wasn't spending it defending my worth. Rachel and I met for coffee one morning, no legal files between us for the first time. "You've changed," she said, smiling. "So have you," I replied. She shrugged. "Watching you was a reminder. The law can do a lot, but it can't fix what people refuse to face." "What do you think happens to him?" I asked. She didn't need clarification. "Nathan," she said, "he'll reinvent himself somewhere new. People like him always do. The question is whether anyone will be watching closely enough." I nodded. I no longer felt responsible for the answer. The holidays came quietly. No invitations, no dramatic exclusions. Just space. I spent Thanksgiving with friends at the lake house cooking too much food and talking long past midnight. On Christmas morning, I woke up alone, brewed coffee, and watched snow fall over the water. For the first time, the day didn't feel heavy. It felt mine. A few days later, my father called. His voice was hesitant, older. "I saw the lights on the lake house from the road," he said. "It looks lived in." "It is," I replied. He paused. "Your mother misses you." I took a breath. I miss who I hoped she could be. He didn't argue. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. "I'm not asking you to," I replied. "I'm asking you to stop breaking it." Another silence. "I'm proud of you," he said finally. It wasn't enough, but it wasn't nothing. In January, I received a handwritten letter from someone I didn't recognize. It was from the former CFO Rachel had mentioned months earlier. He thanked me for standing firm, for not settling quietly, for making it possible for others to speak without being dismissed as unstable. "You changed the temperature," he wrote. "That matters." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer with my grandmother's. Two truths, same lineage. I started volunteering with a small nonprofit that helped women navigate financial transitions after divorce or family estrangement. Not as a savior, as a guide. I didn't tell my story unless asked. When I did, I kept it simple. "You're not imagining it," I'd say. "And you don't have to explain yourself to be worthy of protection." Those words felt like a loop closing. One evening, while organizing old boxes in the lake house attic, I found a photo album I hadn't seen in years. Inside were pictures of me as a child, not posed, not polished, laughing, running, unaware of hierarchies and expectations. I sat on the floor and cried then. Not from grief, from recognition. That girl hadn't disappeared. She had just been waiting. As winter deepened, I realized something else. I was no longer measuring time by crises. There were no countdowns, no looming conversations, no rehearsed defenses. Just days, ordinary, unremarkable, steady. And in that steadiness, I found something I'd never had before. Trust. In myself. The inheritance had given me security. The conflict had given me clarity. But intention gave me freedom. I didn't know exactly what the next year would bring. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I could shape. Quietly. Deliberately. On my own terms. The first real test of my new life didn't come from my family. It came from me. In February, I received an invitation that would have once sent me spiraling. A formal email, polite, carefully worded, from my mother. She and my father were hosting a small gathering, not a holiday, not a celebration, just dinner, a chance to reconnect, she wrote, no expectations. I read the message twice. Then I closed my laptop. For years I would have gone, not because I wanted to, but because I believed refusal was cruelty, that saying no made me the problem, that absence would be interpreted as aggression. This time I didn't feel pulled in either direction. I felt still. I waited 2 days before replying. Thank you for the invitation, I wrote. I'm not ready for that yet. I hope you understand. I didn't explain. I didn't soften it. I didn't offer an alternative date. When I hit send, my chest tightened for a moment. Old instincts flared, anticipation of backlash, guilt, punishment. None came. No angry reply, no follow-up call, just silence. And in that silence, something inside me clicked into place. Boundaries don't create distance, they reveal it. At work, I was asked to lead a new internal review process, one focused on ethics and reporting pathways. The irony wasn't lost on me. During the first meeting, a senior colleague pulled me aside. "You're good at this," she said. "People trust you." Why, I asked. She considered. Because you don't protect power, you protect process. That stayed with me. Power had been the currency in my family. Who had it, who lost it, who pretended not to care while quietly hoarding it. Process was different. Process didn't care who you were. It cared what you did. That alignment between values and action had become my anchor. One evening, Rachel called me unexpectedly. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Of course." "I wanted to let you know," she said, "the regulatory inquiry concluded." My heart skipped, and they found sufficient evidence of misconduct, she said. Civil penalties, professional sanctions, quiet but real. I closed my eyes. Not relief. Completion. He won't practice the way he did before, she added. That chapter is closed. Thank you, I said. For what? For not letting them turn me into the story, I replied. She laughed softly. You did that yourself. That night I walked down to the edge of the lake, snow crunching under my boots. The air was sharp and clean. I stood there for a long time, letting the cold remind me that I was present. I thought about my grandmother, about how she had seen the pattern before I did. She hadn't left me the lake house to reward me. She had left it to interrupt something, to break a cycle that relied on silence and endurance. The next day I received a text from my Aunt Linda. I'm thinking about selling the family cabin, she wrote. Too many memories that don't feel like mine anymore. I stared at the message, then typed back. Good luck. I hope you find something that fits who you are now, she replied with a heart. That was enough. Later that month I met my sister for the first time since everything had settled. Not at a family home, not at the lake house, at a quiet cafe halfway between our lives. She looked different, less polished, more present. I'm not here to ask for anything, she said immediately. I just wanted to see you. I nodded. Okay. We talked cautiously at first, about neutral things, work, weather, small truths. Then she said I didn't know how to stop them. I know, I replied. She swallowed. I let them use me to reach you. Yes, I said gently. She flinched. I'm sorry. I believed her, not because the words were perfect, but because she didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for reassurance. She just said the truth and let it sit between us. When we left, we didn't hug. We didn't promise anything, but we didn't feel like enemies, and that felt honest. Spring crept in slowly. Snow melted. Buds appeared on trees around the lake. The world softened. One afternoon, while cleaning out a closet, I found an old notebook from my 20s. Inside were lists, goals, plans I had abandoned without realizing it. Travel more, right? Live somewhere quiet. I smiled. Somehow, without chasing any of it, I had arrived there anyway. Not because I had planned well, but because I had finally stopped bending myself to fit other people's comfort. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to my parents, not to Nathan, to myself. I wrote about what I had learned, about the cost of silence, about the difference between love and approval, about how fear disguises itself as duty. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as my grandmother's, a conversation across time. As the sun set over the lake, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Certainty. Not about outcomes, about direction. The last chapter wouldn't be about conflict. It would be about integration, about carrying what I'd learned forward without needing to keep looking back. Because the story that once defined me was no longer the one I was living, and I was ready to let it end. The end of the story didn't arrive with closure. It arrived with continuity. On an ordinary morning in early spring, I woke before the alarm not from anxiety or obligation, but because the light coming through the window felt different, softer, warmer, like something had shifted while I wasn't watching. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the lake house, the same place my grandmother used to sit every morning, hands wrapped around her mug eyes on the water. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what had happened. I was thinking about what was next. That was new. For months, my life had been defined by resistance. Even after the battles ended, part of me had stayed alert, waiting for the next attempt to pull me back into old roles. The reasonable one, the quiet one, the one who absorbs. But that morning, there was nothing to brace against. The silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space. Later that day, I drove into town to meet a woman named Marjorie. She had reached out through the nonprofit I volunteered with, asking for guidance after her adult children began pressuring her to simplify her finances. She was 68, sharp, tired. They say it's for my own good, she told me, hands folded tightly in her lap. But somehow it always ends with them holding the pen. I nodded. That's how it usually starts. She studied me. How did you know when to stop cooperating? I didn't answer right away. Not all at once, I said finally. Just one boundary at a time, and then I noticed who respected it. She smiled faintly, and who didn't. Yes, I said, and that told me everything. When she left, she hugged me longer than expected. I wish I'd met someone like you sooner, she said. I watched her walk away and felt a quiet resolve settle in my chest. This was the inheritance. Not the house. Not the money. The interruption. That evening my mother called. I didn't jump to answer. I let it ring, finished what I was doing, then picked up calmly. "Hi," I said. Her voice sounded tentative, older. "I won't keep you," she said quickly. "I just wanted to tell you, I'm starting to understand." I waited. "I don't know how to fix what we broke," she continued. "But I see now that asking you to be quiet was easier than facing the truth." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't denial either. "That's yours to sit with," I said gently, "not mine to resolve." She exhaled. "I hope someday we can talk without everything between us." Maybe I said honestly, "But it won't be on old terms." She didn't argue. When the call ended, I felt no rush of emotion, no relief, no guilt, just acceptance. Some relationships don't end. They transform into something smaller, quieter, held at a distance that finally feels safe. As the season changed, so did my life. I reduced my hours at work and shifted into a role that allowed me more autonomy. I began writing again, not for publication or validation, but because words had always been where I made sense of things. I hosted small dinners at the lake house, not to prove anything, not to replace what I'd lost, but to build what I chose. One night, after everyone had left, I stood alone on the porch, listening to the water lap against the shore. The sky was clear, scattered with stars. I thought about the girl I had been at the wedding, standing near the back of the room, watching an empty chair, tell her exactly where she stood. I wished I could tell her this. You don't lose your place by being excluded. You lose yourself by staying where you are erased. I hadn't lost my family. I had lost the illusion that love requires self-abandonment. And that loss had given me something far more valuable, a life that fit. I went inside, turned off the lights, and let the house settle around me. Tomorrow would come, not with answers, but with choices. And this time every choice would be mine. The story was over. Not because it ended, but because it no longer needed to be told.